ZenJen Connections illuminates the hero's journey and the deeper learnings each of us embodies as a human avatar. We forge our expressions during a finite lifetime as illusory individuals to reconcile and reclaim our eternal place within a greater collective. This unforeseen quest takes place on planet Earth during an epic time of great paradigm shift for humanity at large. And our path is illumined, our visions are inspired, and epiphanies are revealed in the connections we sanction and nurture between each other. Have you ever read Autobiography of a Yogi?
Yes, and my hair is long, and I kind of think I'm channeling my inner
I
Yogananda.
was about to say that. I was about to say that I am picking up on some of his energy right now with whenever we were just talking and you were talking about your you were looking in your cat's eyes and he's more than just a cat. And it
hmm
reminds me of that story that he told in that book about the deer that at the little ashram and the children were playing with it, and
hmm
it was like more than like it was the way he described it is that what was going to come next was a next level of consciousness that
hmm
this deer was destined for, and this was like the last phase right before that, and then the deer fell ill, and he was trying to save the deer, but the deer came to him in a dream and said, "Please let me go."
hmm
And it was destined for a human life. Not to say that human life is more valuable than animal life. It's just a different experience. And you can see that in some animals that they're like ready for that experience because
hmm
they feel similar to us in certain ways.
Yeah, well, two things on that topic. I grow my hair long because I've always felt more comfortable and more connected to everything around me when my hair is long. So I'm trying to hang on to that for as long as possible because I know I'm pushing 40 and in the next 10 years I'll probably be bald because I know my family's genetics.
How
But
funny.
I might end up looking like a mad scientist. I might just have the top bald. Um, and the second thing is that the more I rise in consciousness, the more different animals come to me, and I end up with them as pets. So I have chickens, dogs, cats. I had parakeets, but they recently passed away. And I don't want to tell that story because it's tragic. Um,
Oh, I have
I
so
have
many of those. We can share
white
those at
doves.
another time. It's
Yeah,
heart-wrenching, the things that have happened to some of my animals. I get it.
yeah. I have white doves, and I actually have a little brown dove that came that I rescued, and I also have Birdie. Actually, I can get Birdie. Just give me a second.
So you have little birds all around you.
Yeah, I have Birdie's a pigeon.
Oh, you have a pet pigeon.
Yeah, Birdie is he's called a scaly naped pigeon. They're native to the Caribbean and South America.
Oh my
He's just a
goodness.
baby. He's only 3 months old.
Look at
Hi, Birdie.
that.
Say hi, Birdie.
Oh, wow.
I want to talk on the microphone.
He's talking to me. Look at
Hmm.
that.
Yep. He's very intelligent, so he knows what a microphone is. He knows what a phone is.
He
He knows.
knows what, yeah, he knows what you do with that.
Yep. He knows how to open up Instagram.
Can
I'm
he
trying to
hear
figure out.
me or do you
Yeah,
have
he
like
can hear you.
earbuds in?
He can hear you.
He can.
Say hi, Birdie.
Hi, birdie. Oh, precious.
So he
Wow.
spends most of his day just perched on my shoulder. But
That is amazing. You know, it doesn't surprise me that you have this many creatures around you all the time, Jehan.
yeah,
I was looking at your incarnation cross in your human design,
yeah.
and you are the right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix in the third quarter. meaning third quarter is all about duality and connection between two consciousness, like two people or a person and their pet. It's exchange between two. And I was just like looking over that, and I only know one other person with this incarnation cross, and
Mm.
that's my daughter.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, it's all about the eternal dance of creation, destruction, and rebirth.
Hmm.
And people with this incarnation cross are they are great facilitators of that phenomena, and they are advocates of that life that's that's expressed in those different phases, and they are creators of that life. Some people with that channel that you have specifically that makes you a manifesting generator, some people with that channel are they will have a lot of children, and some people it's not about that. It's about fostering, facilitating, and nurturing a different kind of creation that is meaningful and beautiful. And I didn't know that about you until just today, and now I'm seeing it for myself. It's beautiful.
I also have turtles. I have two redfoot tortoises and I have a freshwater turtle. And I rescued the freshwater turtle again around that same time period that I got the cats. Um there I think there was an issue in the apartment building next to me and everybody moved out and they just left their turtle because they couldn't take pets to where they were moving to and they said nothing to anyone. So um
I can't tell
one
you how
day
many times I've seen people do that, and I don't understand it. I can't fathom it. I could not
I
sleep at night if I did that to my pets, you know?
yeah, I get it. It used to make me angry and now I just kind of push him out the way. I'm like, let's give it to me. I don't care. Go.
Mhm.
So somebody called me and said there's a mysterious container over here and it's just full of black water, but there's something moving in it.
Oh,
Can you
my
come look at it?
Lanta.
And I was like, okay. And I come and I see completely black, full of mold and stuff. And there's a freshwater turtle about this size in there. And so that's how I ended up with Forelli. It's she's 5 years old now.
Wow.
Yep.
Can you even imagine being stuck in that moldy tank? Poor baby.
Yeah. And my hands are full. I have to take care of animals all day long. So it's just as well that I work from home because I
Right?
couldn't imagine having a 9 to 5 and taking care of all these animals.
Yeah, I actually had the exact same revelation, not with animals, but with when my baby was born. And I didn't have any experience like I mean, I had some experience working with kids, but certainly none with babies and keeping a baby alive and having to struggle through like work and scheduling and dropping my little helpless infant off with someone who I knew didn't love her the way I do. It was like torture every single day, the whole time at work, and that's not even like factoring in the amount of stress that job created in like for my nervous system. It just dysregulated me crazy. Like that was right around the time of my first Saturn return. And that's usually what they look like, especially for a line 6 like both of us. You're a 4-6 and I'm a 3-6, or I'm a 6-3 and you're a 4-6.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that first Saturn return is a doozy. What did yours look like? I wanted to ask you that.
What did what? My Saturn return?
Yeah, around age 28 to 30. What were you
28
doing?
to
And I think I
30.
looked yours up. It happened in 2016, I believe. bear with me and I'll confirm that date for sure and certain. And
Yeah.
because the Saturn's return, we are we line sixes have three distinct life phases that are punctuated and catalyzed by those Saturn returns. And we look completely different in each of those life phases. And what Ra Uruhu said about the line six is the reason why we look so different is because the line six is here to experience and embody the full spectrum of what it means to be human. And we have to fit a whole lot into a little finite life. And yeah, it looks like your Saturn return, your first one, was at the age of 28 in February of 2016. Sometimes it can look, it can like actually transpire. The big events can transpire a little bit before or a little bit after, but that's kind of a ballpark for you.
Hmm. Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about my story. Around, let's see, around 2012 to 2013, I was trying to leave the planet. Like, I saw an exit point, and I was like, I want to get out of here. I had enough of this. And I tried to take my own life on three different occasions.
Okay.
On that third attempt, I experienced a near death experience. And I always tell everyone it wasn't the voice of God saying you have to go back, or it wasn't like, some people get shown the destruction of humanity if certain things aren't done. It was really just incredibly peaceful. It was probably at that time the most peace I had ever experienced in my life. And I remember there were two beings that came to me because I was looking in to this space, and somehow I was still conscious of having eyes, of having vision, but my vision was focused around this area of my forehead for some reason. I know I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't feel my body, anything. But there was one being here, one being here, and they didn't have what appeared to be a form. It was just like shimmering. And they weren't speaking to me. What they were doing is we were having some kind of a thought transfer. That's the best way to put it. And I know that I knew them because I recognized them from some dreams that I used to have, recurring dreams when I was a child. And I'd seen them before hovering around me because I almost died from an asthma attack when I was about 7. And I had an out of body experience. I saw all my family and everything. They were all crying and sitting on the bed. And my father was pacing up and down outside with a cigarette. And I could see all that stuff and I could feel everybody's emotions and everything. And I'd seen these two beings were just in the back observing.
Hmm.
And so during that near death experience, I kind of felt like I was being upgraded. Like there was this energy that was just wafting. And even though I couldn't feel my body, I could still feel that energy was coming towards me, like almost like if I was in a steam room and someone was just fanning. That makes sense to you?
Yes, it does.
And so I slept for like 2 weeks after that. And when I got up, I just knew that I wanted to change my life. I was about 265 pounds overweight. And currently I'm actually 115 pounds less than I
Wow.
was then. So I started going on this journey of self transformation, and then people started handing me books, um, Sylvia Brown books, and then that was when this lovely lady Tina Gili, who's now passed away, she was roommates with a popular bodybuilder at that time, and she just messaged me on Facebook, and it turns out she was a fan of my music, and she's like, I don't know why, but if there's anything I can do to help you, just say the word and I'll help you. And I was like, yeah, I'm fat and I want to get out of here. And she was like, okay, I got you covered. And She trained me from abroad. She sent me protein shakes. She's the one, I think I told you this story already. She's the one that sent me a DVD by Wayne Dyer, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. I watched that, and then that kickstarted my spiritual awakening. So
Wow.
I moved to through another synchronistic event. I got my visa and I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. And that was 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I got introduced to more mainstream spiritual ideas and astrology and all these different things, because that kind of stuff's taboo in Barbados still. You can't really talk about it, or you kind of get treated like you're a demon worshiper.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to remember exactly. So you said 2016. So by 2016, I'd moved from
So you
Seattle.
moved to Nashville in 2014. That's where we left off.
Yeah, and I traveled all around using Nashville as a base for a while, just the lower states, Kentucky, and moved forward in that direction. Then I ended up in Seattle, and I decided to stay in Seattle for a while. And by 2016, I was living in Pennsylvania. So I think it was December of 2015, I was living in Pennsylvania, and I decided to stay there permanently
Mm-hmm.
to do music because it was more suited for the kind of music I was playing. Because I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but that's, Breaking Benjamins from Wilkes-Barre, um, you have like Motionless in White, those people, that real heavy, dark, hard rock, heavy metal music. So that's kind of where I stayed. And that was when I had my angel moment, so to speak, because I was at a bar in Allentown, and this really tall guy with blonde hair and blue eyes and this strange glowing appearance, like he had the most joyful countenance I've ever experienced. It, so that's what made me think this guy couldn't be real after the experience, because that's when he taps me on the shoulder and he says, "You seem to have a tremendous affinity for leadership. Have you ever heard of coaching?" And I was like, "No, I just hold that thought." And I finished talking to the sound guy. When I turned around to talk to this guy to say, tell me more about what you were saying, he was gone. And because the venue was empty, it was just us setting up. I looked everywhere and he was gone. I even checked the bathrooms and everything. I was like, why would you ask me a question and then just disappear? He couldn't wait like 2 seconds. And I always had this thing, I always have had this thing about, if somebody addresses me, I talk to them. I find out what they want, because you never know what somebody wants or what they can tell you, right? So I looked for him. He was gone. And I thought that was so bizarre that I actually went back to the house that night and I looked up what is coaching. And so that's what got me on that path. So around 2016, I would have been finishing my first certification as a life coach, with the
Okay. That makes
Mary
really good
Morrison.
sense.
Yeah,
That's
Mary Morrison.
so that encounter, you called it an angel experience, but
I'm pretty
whenever
sure.
you
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
started,
it was an angel, or it was some kind of like an ET
that's what I
experience.
was going to get to. Whenever you started this kind of trek down memory lane, you mentioned that you wanted to leave this planet. And my brother, he passed away by his own choice. He left us at age 20, and we read his journals, and he had very different ideas. He didn't want to deal with it anymore. He didn't want to, it wasn't that he was going away, like he wanted to leave this planet. It was that he wanted it all to stop. And those are two different things. And I'm wondering, like, if there was some kind of a subconscious awareness, even when you were trying to end your own life, that there was something else out there. There was something more that was waiting for you. Just the choices that you were making at that juncture weren't exactly how to get you there, if
Yeah,
that
I'll
makes
tell you.
sense.
Yeah, I'll tell you that that's the truth because there is a song by a band called Cinch, and I used to listen to that song over and over. It's called Something More, and the lyrics are, "I believe there's something more, but this isn't what I've been looking for, and if I blink my eyes, I'm afraid I'll miss some of it."
Hmm.
And that explained exactly where I was at that time. I would listen to it over and over and wonder what, what was I really here for? And that band in itself addresses a lot of issues like the brokenness of society. Um, they don't specifically use conspiracy terms, but they address things like the hive mind and how everybody's just going along to get along and all those kinds of things. So I already knew something was wrong. My soul felt it, and I felt that way for a lot of my life. I This culture, you have to be a strong-minded person to rise above Caribbean culture, and it's because everyone is rooted subconsciously in patterns of slave thinking. If you look at history, you'll even see that Barbados created the manual for slavery. It was made here. It's the
Mm.
manuscript for how slavery is conducted all around the world because of the sugar plantations and the cotton fields and stuff that were here. We still supply a large portion of that sugar to the world. And so um it's called the Barbados Slave Code. And if you look at how we are actually treated on this planet, a lot of it aligns directly with how we get treated by government officials, et cetera, et cetera. There's this illusion that things are getting better when in reality, the screws are being tightened a little bit more. And I think at that time, I just kind of started to come online. But I believe that everybody has these exit points throughout their life where they can do a certain number of things and then they can choose to try to get off the planet however they can if they want to. And I think I was a little bit like your brother in some ways, but my affliction was the inability to process having to feel like I was being forced, like somebody had toothpicks in my eyeballs like this, or like a speculum or something, and they were just making me watch the gradual decline of society and seeing how everybody acted and realizing that nobody actually really seemed to care about me or anything that I had to say or anything I was interested in. Everybody was just very dismissive. And so when I said I had issues with anxiety or I felt depressed or I'm sad all the time and I don't know why or any other issue, they would always say it's your damn fault. You know, I, I don't even want to talk about it. All those different types of things. They would just act like what I was experiencing wasn't real. So I was on my own. And I think that's where it all really began for me. And I think that around 2016 is when things started to make sense completely because when that guy came up to me, I was going through this period where it's like I feel like the music industry is broken and I want to leave this. And I didn't know what to do because naturally I'm being pushed now into a situation where I'm in crisis mode because I'm transitioning from one thing, this thing that I've only known since I was about 10 years old. And now I'm a certain age. And I'm like, I've got 2 decades of this under my belt. I don't know who I am without my guitar. I don't know who I am when I'm not on stage watching other people smile, but I don't feel good without that, right? So
Absolutely.
my entire
Yeah.
identity was tied to something that was fake, and I had to be willing to just break that pattern. And so that's when September 2016 is when I finished doing the course with the Life Mastery Institute. and I wasn't satisfied with it. And that made me dive into Eastern spirituality. And I started reading all of the texts. I reread the Bible several times. I read the Bhagavad Gita, you name it. And I meditated. And I think my roommates thought I was going nuts. They thought I was having some kind of psychosis or something, because they would all be asleep and I would just be up all hours of the night and the morning, reading and writing and meditating and studying, trying to figure out what was going on. So I think a lot of people thought I was losing it, and I could definitely see I could definitely see why they would say that, but that's where I
You were
was.
actively transforming right
Mm-hmm.
before their eyes, and that is not a comfortable thing for the person transforming or the people witnessing it sometimes.
Yeah, I mostly stayed away from them because I felt like a lot of what they were saying was negative, and where I was at, I needed to rapidly transform. And the thing about it is that we hear people talk about the morphogenetic field and stuff all the time in this arena, but I realized that it was a real thing because I started to lose a lot of weight. The more spiritual ideas I took on, and the more programming I got rid of, and the more I deleted memories and things like that, and I learned how to do all that, the skinnier I got.
Mm-hmm.
And but what was happening is that as I would lose weight, then memories from other places would begin to just push themselves into my awareness through my, like, just daily washing dishes or sweeping the yard or reading something, you name it. And I would have to figure out how to process those things while I was doing what I was doing, because there was a lot of moments where I couldn't just stop. And that's what really got me into being so fascinated with the subconscious mind and what it really is and the capabilities that we have. And so that was when early 2017, that was when I started hitting a cap. So imagine your eyes are closed and you're looking up and you're going through the different levels of consciousness, and you can see almost like you're traversing through a space, and it's circular. It's concentric circles almost. And there's concentric circles that go up in a spiral, and there's concentric circles that go out around you. And it's infinite, just places you can go. And I realized that I would start to hit, as I went up this direction and I sent my consciousness upwards, I'd start to hit a ceiling. And it would
Mm-hmm.
feel like that. Mentally, it would feel like that. It's hard to describe the
No,
how
I know
strong
exactly
it is,
what you're
right?
talking about. I've experienced exactly what you're describing. I
Right.
know what you mean. I hit the same
And that
glass ceiling, or I mean, it's like an invisible barrier, or
uh-huh.
what some people I've heard call the what is it, those the flat earthers call it? You know what I'm talking about. The
I don't know,
mm.
because I have no interest in the flat earth whatsoever,
It's
because
referenced in the Bible. If you've read the Bible, it's the gosh, the word is escaping me. Golly. It's the I'll think of it in a second. Go on
right,
though.
right. Um, so that's when I felt um like a hand touched my left shoulder, and it was just kind of touching me like this, trying to get my attention. And that was when I started hearing, you have to stop drinking coffee, right? And I was like, why? And yes, naturally I resisted it because we're told, anything up to 8 cups of coffee a day is good for you and all this kind of crap. I won't get into it too much, but then I started to research and I stopped drinking it, and I did my meditations, and it was terrible because, you're going through withdrawal and things like that. But the more I meditated, the easier it was for me to get over it. And I started to push past that invisible ceiling. So,
I figured it out. It's the firmament.
right.
The firmament. That's what I was calling it whenever I was like hitting it. And I know exactly what you mean. And
Right.
for me, it was a very discouraging experience.
Right.
and it actually sent me barreling back down
Exactly. It will.
into the abyss from whence I
Exactly.
came.
I'm glad you said that because that's exactly what happens to people. And that's why I remove caffeine and sugar and junk food and processed foods from my clients' diets because it will push you back into the familiar faster than anything else. It's like hitting a rubber wall and it knocks you right
Hmm.
back. So the
It like
subconscious can't
ricochets
comprehend what's happening.
you even.
Hmm. So even if like
That's
I,
so
I can't believe
crazy.
I'm saying this, but even if you resume drinking caffeine after you work with me, you are going to find that some of the things that you've experienced because you've now pushed through this barrier and it's like opening a huge funnel at the top of your head. It's like trying to fit, a camel through the eye of the needle. Sorry to use that that thing, but
Hmm.
it's like it's trying to squeeze through this barrier. So it's better to have a bloodstream that is as clean as possible, as clear as possible, because that affects your ability to do things. So that's what I figured out was happening then. And at that time, I was eating anything I could find as well because I was broke. I was sleeping on the floor on a yoga mat that somebody gave me, right? And then eventually somebody gave me a bed. And then I was able to work a little bit more. And I was also giving guitar lessons and things like that. And I was able to get more things that I needed to do what I had to do. I had to struggle on the come up, as they say. But I realized too that like those things were affecting me and um the same feeling would come over me and I would like I gotta stop eating ice cream. I gotta stop doing this. I gotta stop doing everything. It's like, so when am I actually gonna eat anything? I have no idea. But I eventually got to a point where I was like, I'm all I can do is drink water. All I can do is go down to the speedway and get a couple gallons of water. And that's what I got to survive on for a
That was
while.
all
And so
that was available at that time.
that, yeah, that was clean
So
because
you were like forced into a type of fasting sequence.
essentially,
Maybe
yeah,
not forced, but led to, rather.
yeah. So essentially, there was periods of time where 24, 36 hours would pass, and I didn't have anything really good to eat. Our roommates would be like, hey, "Listen, you got to eat something. What are you prepared to eat?" And I'd be like, "Vegetables." And they'll be like, "Well, okay, we don't have vegetables, but we're gonna go to this restaurant down the street. If they have something vegetarian, we'll pick something up for you." And so that was what I did. And then eventually I ended up mentoring some kids, and those kids' parents would feed me. And that was a very short space of time, but I changed very rapidly in those months. And that's when I wanted to just like become a vegetarian and keep my consciousness as clean as possible. I stopped watching television. For most people, they think that watching TV is a source of connection, but it's really not. You're not paying attention and being present with the person. It's two people sitting next to each other, staring at a screen, zoning. And so I couldn't do that either because I would fall asleep. Like after like 30 minutes or so, I'd fall asleep. The TV would put me right to sleep. I just couldn't. My body and my consciousness resisted all those experiences. And so I'm basically telling everybody the ins and outs now of how I got to be so freaking weird. That's what happened. I just stopped doing all of the earthly things that we're told we're supposed to do. And that accelerated my ability to experience certain things even more. And I want that genuinely for everyone because when those two beings came to me and they're like this and they're transferring and this energy is wafting towards me, I was just having an understanding as to this is what's going on this planet. It's optional and people are getting ready to understand this information, but you have to live that life and you have to want to change and you have to inspire others. And that's not optional. And I was like, what do you mean that's not optional? So I thought about that for a long time. Like, what did they mean when I felt like they were telling me it's not optional? So they were saying that's your mission. That's your journey to try to inspire people. But I always knew that with that, I couldn't force anybody to do anything either. So here I am. So it's interesting. And I wanted to touch on something else that you said before too. What did you call it? Something of the Phoenix?
Yes, your incarnation cross is the right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix. And I'm going to say a couple of things about this particular thing. First of all, the incarnation cross is comprised of your personality sun, your personality earth, and then your design sun and your design earth. Some people call this your conscious and your unconscious aspects of your human design. The personality side, it matches up apples to apples with your astrological natal chart.
Mm-hmm.
The design side is something that is calculated approximately 88 days prior to your birth, and it has a very big impact on who it is that you are and what it is that you came to embody.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we are right now, as we speak, steadily moving closer to a new global cycle that is called the cross of the sleeping phoenix. And it is because the gates that will be activated by the transit of this 400-year long cycle that we are entering into in 2027, that is those same gates that will be activated in a cosmic way are present in your activations of your human design personally. And
Okay.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm looking at it right now.
So what specifically does all of that mean in layman's terms?
So the best thing that I can show you, here we go. Let's share my screen for a moment. If
Okay. Now I've got a big screen over here that I've got to look at.
Can you see your body graph,
Yes.
Jehan?
Yes.
Okay. So all of these aspects in the color black, this is your personality aspect or your conscious aspect. And each one of these gates that you'll find represented by a number, they're also represented in your centers. For example, your personality sun is in gate 59, the gate of dispersion out of your defined sacral center. That is one of the 4 gates that make up your incarnation cross, which is the right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix in the 3rd quarter. See these
Okay.
4 little squares at the top? Those 4 together, they are said to that comprise the vast majority of not just your personality, but your purpose here on earth at this time. Like your earth placement, that's something different than what astrology accounts for. They look at it as the earth is at the center stage, like the center of the universe, so to speak, whereas human design puts the person as that point of reference, and the earth is a very vital planetary property that's also having an effect on you, and it's at a specific placement at your time of birth or your personality aspect and your time of design, your unconscious aspect in red. And so, you know, it's if I show you this particular if I can show you the mandala aspect, this will give you a different idea of, you see these different gates, like your gate 59, that was your personality sun, the gate of dispersion. It's actually activated under the sign of Virgo, alongside multiple other gates that you don't have activated as a like we all have access to all of these energies, but these are not naturally flowing through you. You need to come into contact with something external to yourself for the ones that are not activated for you to have the experience of those energies.
Mhm.
And but in gate 59 specifically, you have that one activated in 3 different properties: your personality sun, your personality Venus, and your personality Mars, which is interesting. And if you look at my human design really quickly, I'll show you. See, this is the gate that you have activated here, the gate of dispersion. I have the gate of conflict. Friction is also a name it's known by. And together, these two, can you see this connection chart between our energies?
Uh-huh.
So this is your chart that we were looking at, and this is mine. And this is what our energies look like whenever they come together. You see, we activate quite a few channels, is what they're called. Whenever 2 different gates come together, we give
Uh-huh.
the other person access to that energy whenever we are in proximity of energetic exchange with each other.
Mhm.
And it gives us access to energies that we don't have consistent access to in isolation. But
Mhm.
it's not so much that I'm giving you mine and you're giving me yours. It's that because mine is activated, it is waking your access to yours up, if that
Mhm.
makes any sense at all. But I found it incredible, all of everything that you described, being as we are about to enter a global cycle that's known as the cross of the sleeping phoenix, and it's characterized by great change and great shift, and it's characterized also by a shift in focus towards the individual rather than these collective features of institutions and corporations and um all of these different categories that have really been built up in this global cycle that we have been in for the last 400 years. It's created this globalization it's very collective centered, and that's the quarter that we are currently in under the cross of planning, which is about to end, and it's shifting back towards a focus on individualization with the person rather than with what group or hashtag you identify with, so to speak.
Yeah, you see, I get that as well, just from my own intuitive faculties. I get that. And that's why, like I said, there's this turning of the screws that continues to happen. And I think that it's happening more and more rapidly because those in authority know that their time is coming to an end. They'll only be able to, it'll be the few controlling the few, in other words. And there's going to be a lot more people that maybe they'll just be a small fraction online, but they won't want to send their children to school anymore. They won't want to work 9 to 5. They won't want to go to church as much. They want to seek inner wisdom and determine for themselves what um the great text of the world, regardless of whatever their faith is, what that means for them. And I feel like there's going to be a long period of transition. I think
Mm.
that where we're at right now is entering a crisis mode. And that's why you see so much entitlement and selfishness and narcissism and anger and murders and things like that. Because it's kind of like squeezing the toothpaste out of the tube, but now you don't know how to get it back in there. And the only way to get it back in there is to actually get a whole new tube of toothpaste, because you're not going to succeed at that, right?
Yeah,
And
and see, there it is. There's that cycle of life and death and rebirth that you have this keen awareness of. You have this innate understanding that this is where we're headed, and it's because you were born to embody and you were born to express the wisdom of that energy. That's what your incarnation cross shows. And we're all here to express a certain kind of wisdom. We're all here to tap into what it is that makes us innately ourselves, and we all have this purpose. Whether or not we're all following that purpose, that's an entirely different story. And I loved something that you said earlier, and I'm going to touch on it for a second. You were saying the more and more I got into spirituality, what you alluded to was the more things got pulled away, more things got removed, is what I heard. And that has been an experience that I've had. Like, people they'll have an awakening and they'll have this experience, and it differs from person to person. But at first, what they want to do, at least what I've witnessed and what I've experienced, is you want to add things, new things, different than what you did before. When in fact, it's the stripping away of the accumulations that you've acquired thus far. Like, I mean, in your case, the caffeine and the ice cream and these things that, until you're only left fasting with water, that really speaks to my first awakening so well. I hit that same firmament that you described, and I it sent me spiraling back downwards. I had lost 80 pounds and I eventually gained it all back. I've yo-yoed a bit back and forth since then, but it was this stark difference from what I came from before and what I was eating and how I was living. But you hit this threshold, and that was a very elusive and strange thing that I haven't pondered since, until today when you brought it back up.
Yeah. So eventually what happens though, you'll gain the weight back, you'll gain some of it back, but if you embark on a journey again where you go through that process, you experience something called negative weight gain. So your body actually finds whatever is written in your DNA is a comfortable size for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you tend to stay there, and it's very difficult to lose any more weight, and it's very difficult to gain any more weight. And when you live a chemical free lifestyle, what happens is that your liver is so clean that it just pushes toxins out of you constantly, and you can't hold any weight on your body whatsoever. So it's another way of saying that is then when you remove these chemicals from your body, you change your frequency, and it moves so rapidly that you're always hungry. There's nothing that
Mm-hmm.
can satisfy your cravings. You eat, and then in another 3 hours you're extremely hungry again. And for me, that's torture, but thank God there's delicious fruit to eat. I eat so much fruit because I find that's the only thing that keeps me satisfied for a long period of time. Things like fruit and oatmeal and potatoes and things like that. um you'll get to a point where your body rejects meat, and you'll start getting allergies to like cheese and
Mm-hmm.
eggs and things like that. So some people do, some people might not, but that depends on your genetic makeup, whatever your ancestors commonly ate. That's why, like, there's that saying where there's like 70% of people are lactose intolerant. Well, the reason for that is just simple genetics. Some people didn't, get exposed to dairy and stuff like that, or it wasn't cow's milk, it was from sheep, goats, things like that, right?
There's a
So
lot of things that you'll start eating again that didn't bother you before.
that bother you
But
now.
then, yeah, it's a totally different
Mm-hmm.
thing after your body has detoxed from certain things.
Mm-hmm.
What my experience for me, and this isn't everyone's, was gluten and wheat products.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was
Yeah,
able
well,
to eat all of those just fine, but then afterwards, after I had stopped for a long time and I tried to again, it
yeah.
caused all sorts of problems. And it changed my ability to connect with my intuition and my extrasensory gifts in very poignant ways, very noticeable ways
Yeah, well,
that
there's a lot to that as well too, and I mean, I'm aware of our time restraints and stuff too. There's other things I want to talk about, but just to hijack this topic for
yeah,
another
go
minute,
ahead.
I don't think that as many people are aware as yet that it's pesticides and stuff, and it's not
Mhm.
necessarily gluten. There's people out there that can eat gluten, and it was never an issue before, but it's the pesticides and it's the genetically modified wheat where the larger percentage of wheat is genetically modified. And so if you used to eat bread your entire childhood and now you're allergic to it, it could be that. And it could be that you just need to learn to make your own bread.
Yeah.
And I'm using that specific example because it's about stepping away from the matrix. It's about stepping away from the reliance on store bought this and all these different things that people know this is happening, but they don't understand on a spiritual level the real reasons why this is happening. It's about independence, it's about individualism, as you were saying. And that's the only way that we are going to experience a extreme burst in super consciousness, so to speak. If people will become individuals and turn off the TV and stay away from whatever ASAP Rocky or Taylor Swift or whatever they're singing about and learn to be a creator versus a consumer. You make your own food, you grow your own food, you play your own instruments for entertainment, you entertain your family, even if it's covers of the same artists I mentioned before, it's you that's doing it. So the intention of it is different than if you're consuming it and consuming those frequencies that are going into you on a cellular level, which keep you stuck, keeps your
Mhm.
consciousness stuck. It lowers you right back down. It takes you away from neutrality, which is up here around 200, back down into the emotional content of the music, of the frequency itself. If you look at frequency lists from like a Royal Rife or somebody like that, and you see how cancer is on a particular frequency or leukemia is on a particular frequency, and you realize that those frequencies are actually within the realm of hearing. As a person who makes his music, I can explain to you very concisely that if you have 528 hertz and that's a solfeggio frequency, if you have that on your spectrograph and you go to it and you see it and you isolate it and you turn it all the way up, it's not a pleasant frequency to hear. It makes everything muddy, inaudible, hard to hear. So what do engineers do? They take that out so that it's more aesthetically pleasing to the composition. So if you take that out, you take the love out of it. Does that make sense? So you have these engineers that are manipulating frequencies, whether they have bad intentions or not. They're just doing it to get a final product. So when you consume that, you're not having a balanced frequency spectrum, and it affects you negatively or positively depending on what has been done to it. And so when you learn to create your own music, you realize that none of that stuff that they say in like conspiracy theorists talk about 440 hertz or whatever, none of that makes a difference, because as you're cycling through these chord progressions, it's still all the same frequencies, but it's not having a detrimental effect on you using your intention. It only affects you when you take in from a source outside of you. So when you go to a
Hmm.
concert, it actually makes it easier for you to get sick. Say there's a flu going around or something. It makes it easier for you to get sick because you touch something, you don't wash your hands, you pick your nose, you rub your ears, or you touch your mouth or your face or something, you eat something and it gets in, it goes in your stomach. And whatever you eat after that, it's feeding that bad bacteria that makes you sick a few days later. But you've been systematically weakened because you've been standing in front of these loudspeakers that have a wide frequency spectrum It's vibrating your cells in
Mm-hmm.
random directions that your cells have to recover from. So it, I like to take the antagonistic part out of it, where there's somebody that's doing something to you. You chose to be there, but you have to know that there's dangers that go along with this. So until we're all entertaining our own families and um, coming up with little skits and playing Pictionary and board games and doing things that are, interactive with each other, where our cells then come together as one unit, individuals meeting in the middle, then we're all screwed effectively. That's what I'm saying. That's what the evolution of consciousness is about. It's about relating to each other as cells would be in an organism, rather than disconnect. And that's what social media does: staring at screens, staring at phones, all of the selfishness. I'm just going to go do whatever I want to do regardless of what the other person is. That's what that is. That's cancer, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Manifest as people walking around being cancerous with their behaviors and how they can choose to consume things, I should say,
Yeah.
right? So
Well,
that's my
and
life.
I mean, at a fundamental level, human design teaches that this entire human experience is about duality. And like, yes, the old ways teach us that we are all one consciousness, and we all do have all the access to all of the energies. But because of the differentiation between each and every person at the individual level, we get to have this illusory and fleeting experience that we are indeed different. And
Mhm.
there are interactions I wanted to touch on, because that it kind of blew my mind when you were talking about the music concerts, the big festivals, how I would always become sick afterwards. And I always felt like it was something I was like doing to myself, because maybe I just didn't prefer to be there, but other people did. But yes, I did become sick afterwards. And yet there are other experiences of energetic exchange where we ourselves are absorbing someone else's energy, and it's activating something, it's catalyzing our desire to create and to interact, because we are absorbing an energy that they are sharing with us. But then there are other instances like the ones you are describing that are way too hot for YouTube. Some of those are going to be edited out and put somewhere separate. But this is something that's happening at a very big scale, that it's intentional, it's engineered, like you put it, that this is something that's being fed to us for us to absorb, and it's effectively shutting down our ability to do those things, because it whoever is engineering this has an understanding of how this system works.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. There's levels, and they're trying to keep us at levels 1, 2, and 3, when by now we should be at like 100, because that's we were closer. Let's see, say we were at like level 15 to 20 years ago. But
Mhm.
it's been this massive attempt to squash it because, those forces, let's call them negative spiritual forces, are aware that their time is limited if they do this, because you're talking about an energy exchange. It's never been about money. It's always been about control. It's
Mhm.
always been about suppression, because let's face it, I'm to the point now where I remember past lives on other planets, and the form that I saw myself in was very human. So that tells me that there have been for a long time humans on other planets.
Mhm.
But so sometimes let's make sure people get that, because a lot of people get, they're at level 3 or 4, and they love the ET thing, and they're very fascinated by that, but they have blinders on because all they want to hear is there's ETs. But sometimes it's not Pleiadians, it's not Arcturians. Sometimes it's humans from other
Yeah.
planets. And I believe that some of those humans are connected to the ones that are trying to suppress us. I don't necessarily think it's all negative reptilians or whatever. We will never know. We will actually never know until somebody breaks into a meeting and gets it on Instagram Live or something, and 8 billion people collectively all see it at once. We're never going to know who's actually running the show. It could be Marvin the Martian, for all I know. It could be, the psychedelic discombobulator. That's what it could be. But there's a lot of things that are going on. And so until we begin to take those blinders off and look at everything, because as humans as it is, it's interesting, we only have 180 in every direction. But when you start to harness your consciousness, whether it's through meditation or taking the chemicals out or learning a martial art or something like that, you begin to have a 360 focus. Like, it's almost like people can't sneak up on you. Your awareness, your energy is so spread out that you have to remember to pull it back closer in towards you. Otherwise, you would go around absorbing everybody else and everything else in it. It's like it becomes like a vortex, a whirlwind almost. And so people have to learn to open up their focus and their awareness completely and take in a little bit of everything and a little bit of every possibility and a little bit of every belief system, and try to understand that everything has a purpose. Because until we understand everything in its right place, there is always going to be that push and pull between the dualistic experience. And the idea is to step away from that. What most spiritual gurus and stuff won't tell their followers is that there's more than just two. Duality says there's just two, but there's more than that. And so you always get the confusion between the infinite potential and the duality. But you just push that to the side and realize I can allow myself to have multiple experiences without having to judge it as good or bad, but understanding that internal judgment, it's not a bad thing. That's just actually how we think. That's how the brain works. There's so many areas of the brain that are responsible with judging things as good or bad, right? And we just have to learn to work
Right.
with. But
I mean,
if we,
even just the right and the left hemisphere of the brain.
Mhm.
Oh,
I
go
would
on.
actually,
Sorry, I think
I
you're
would
cutting out a
actually,
second there.
yeah, I would actually give people permission to go on YouTube and look up a guitar player called Mike Dawes and watch him play. You don't even really have to listen to what he's doing, but watch him play, and you notice that he has an acoustic guitar set up, and he's got an electric guitar pickup on this thing. He's got somehow he's got a kick drum built into this thing, and he's just tapping it with his fingers and he's playing. But the music that he's playing, there's so much going on, he doesn't need anybody else. But when you look at him and you look at his face and his body, and if you're the type of person that sees energy, you see like a whole field opens up and something comes into him when he's doing this, and he's channeling, and he's doing these complex compositions on one instrument by himself. And what I'm saying there is that we all have the capacity to be Mike Dawes. When he turns on, both hemispheres of his brain hardwire and like solder together or something like that. And there's nothing else happening in his mind besides this music that's coming out of him. There's no other thoughts whatsoever. Right. And that's
Right.
kind of what it has to be like. And so for some people as well, that's a great example. That is their experience of super consciousness, so to speak. Right.
Right. And it's a process of accessing that, and that duality that we're experiencing, it is illusory. And yet it is something that is I don't know if you would call it a universal law, or rather just a principle or a model that is comprised in what human design calls the mechanics of the Maya. Maya being the illusion. that we're all operating within, and it has the illusion that it's real because we are co-creating and coexisting within it simultaneously with a seemingly similar experience across the board, but that's not real either. And yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
is
real.
something that we as an individual, I believe, like you have touched on something that this paradigm shift is going to be bringing into our fields, because, you know, with every new paradigm shift, with every new dawning of every new global cycle, there is something different that occurs that we can't even conceptualize of, like we don't know what's coming next. But we're in this we are in an active state of evolution,
Mhm.
as like humanity in general is in an active state of evolution, and how it is that we can process energy is
Mhm.
changing, and that's been happening for quite some time.
Yeah,
The capacity is increasing, but whether or not we will all meet and reach that capacity is another thing entirely.
totally up to our individuality.
Mhm.
And I'll say something else to solidify that point. I have known, I shouldn't say I have known, I know people who have known the great leaders, Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, Stuart Wild. Actually, I've gotten permission to use a lot of Stuart Wild's early teachings in like some of the things that I do from a direct line, because I have someone that was very close to him, and they're still close to his family and stuff. And I was told that, Stuart would absolutely love for you to carry on some of his teachings in your work. So I've been doing that. But why did they die before their time? Louise Hay, why did she struggle with cancer? Why did Wayne Dyer struggle with his disease? I think was it leukemia or something like that?
Yes, I can't
Uh,
remember what it was, but yes, you're
it's
you're
chemical.
setting it up to something that I have been thinking and want to allude to here at the end about the role models that set the stage for the rest of us. Those of us who don those titles, those of us who are ascribed those roles, it's it's not done genuinely from a place of ego, when it's done in a genuine way, whenever, like you and like I, we are both these line 6, me in the conscious aspect, you in the unconscious aspect. These line 6s are here as role models to wake people up, and we are not embodying those roles from a place of ego. We're doing so with a heavy heart, because it actually weighs very heavily on those who are here to do this work. And many of
Yeah.
us don't make it to what I call the saturation of the 6, the culmination and integration of all of that wisdom that we acquire in the course of a very tumultuous life.
Mhm.
A
Yeah.
lot of us, like my brother, he was also a line 6. He didn't make it. He didn't make it past age 20. A lot of
Yeah.
us don't. And a lot
Yeah.
of us, even if we do make it to that pinnacle, like you're talking about Wayne Dyer, and I'm gonna have to
Louise
look up
Hay.
his human design. I'm fascinated by that. But even then, it takes a toll
Mhm.
always.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say to you. Like Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer and those guys at that level, they had a certain level of tools, like the affirmations and stuff like that was what Louise Hay was really well known for, and just the positive thinking, the whole power of positive thinking thing. That's all dead now.
Hmm.
We're at a time in humanity where we need way more spiritual technology than just that. And so it's one of the reasons why I often talk about affirmations and how ineffective they really are, because you're trying to strong arm your conscious mind when really all you need to do is go straight to the subconscious. And so that has ushered in work from people like Bradley Nelson, for example, using the muscle testing to figure out what your own subconscious programs is. What is it you affirm to yourself underneath the surface, and you can change that permanently. And which is another thing that I do. But they were at a particular level. They were unable to hold the frequency of the information that was trying to come into them. And all of that stress, plus they were still drinking coffee and drinking alcohol and eating all the sugar and stuff like that, thinking that they were invincible, living the illusion that is pushed on the spiritual community, that you can alchemize anything if you're on a high frequency, but it's incredibly hard to remain on a high frequency when you self-sabotage, right?
Yeah.
So
It's yes,
it
exactly.
should be obvious, but it's not. And so I'm using that as another way to illustrate the departure from one level of consciousness up to a much higher level of consciousness now, where the ones that are at the top, the leaders and stuff, they will be completely clean. And as it is, we already have problems with technology sometimes when we get on here and it's our frequency that disturbs the electromagnetic patterns. It's going to be a lot like that, and you're going to be able to feel these people when they enter a room, because
Oh,
it'll
don't I
be,
know it?
yeah,
I
it'll be
mean,
like a
you've been on enough podcasts. I'm sure you've experienced that firsthand, just like I have.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. The interesting part about Stuart Wells' death is that he had stigmata. He was at a conference and he was hit by a bolt of energy. It came from the back of the room, and then his hands stopped working, and it was an incredibly painful experience where he could just like lay on the floor, and he like sometimes he had to lay there and he'd like piss himself and stuff like that, because whatever that energy was that hit him, it disabled his energy field completely. He started to effectively just die after that. And there's gonna be a lot more stuff like that too. Like there's gonna be people who want to take you out, or entities that want to take you out and want to stop you from putting certain information out there. But that's just the reality of it. And I don't even really think that those things can touch you unless you have the idea in your head that they can, like you have to keep your frequency up so that any lower attacks will just, I wouldn't say bounce off you, but absorb and be transmuted into pure consciousness, right?
Right.
So,
And I call them the powers that should not be,
me too.
that that you've alluded to a couple of times. And yeah, with these other entities, I think people get caught up in needing to define what they are. The ones that don't have our best interest at heart, whether they are inhabiting a different dimension or if they are inhabiting this one, but they are simply invisible to us. It's not something that I think to a certain point, what you said is true. We have to open up our field to receive that to a point that it is going to affect us. That being said, there is quite a bit of trickery afoot that is rampant, that is manipulative. And sometimes what it looks like is whenever you're bouncing back from a higher frequency of expression and experience, like we talked about, when we hit that firmament and it won't let us go any further, and we bounce back, and all we're looking for is something familiar, but we still have a foot in that other realm that most people don't have access to, but other things do. And so, we did open ourselves up to that. And now we're in this disoriented state of looking for something familiar. And many of us, like myself, I'll just come out and say it, there were entities that were feeding off of me during adolescence. And just a year ago, I actually encountered one of them again, that I had opened myself up to it like decades ago, and I encountered it again. It was something familiar. It was something that like I recognized, and yeah, I was curious. And that was not something for my higher good. It's taken me the better part of a year to bounce back from that and collect my pieces. It's I don't think that it's good for people to claim a state of victimhood. I don't think that's serving them at all. But I also think that we have to look at all of the factors and not um gaslight people into thinking that, well, you opened yourself up to that, and you have to, we have to be compassionate from this
Mhm.
place of, like my husband says, every time we leave our neighborhood and drive around, everything
Mhm.
that's for sale is poison,
Mhm.
you know? And it's like that is by design, and that's messed
Everything
up.
everything that is for sale is poison, and everything that we're taught is poison.
Mhm.
It's spiritual poison. And so, like, one of the things that I do sometimes with some clients is that I realize that the reason why they don't get better, the reason why they'll take on a particular protocol and they'll reach a particular part of their spiritual development and they'll spiral backwards is because underneath the surface they've been programmed with helplessness,
Mm.
right? And so sometimes what you do is you implant in the person's subconscious the idea that there's always at least three solutions to any problem, any situation, any circumstance. There's always at least three alternate outcomes so that their subconscious looks for those things even when they get into another situation. Say it's another situation and there's a level of unawareness where there's a subconscious program about to fire off in response to a stimulus that nobody knows anything of. I don't know about it. They don't know about it. Maybe they can't see it, obviously, because they're inside of the picture. Um, that helps them to find alternate solutions and alternate ways of thinking to get out of that program, right? So I try not to leave people without that implanted in their subconscious because that's how we're going to survive. Every time we go into survival mode, it's not going to be the negative programs that help us. It's going to be the awareness that there's solutions underneath. It's going to be the awareness that you have to take personal responsibility to get out of there, to kind of MacGyver yourself out of the situation, so to speak. I don't know if for younger folks that
MacGyver.
don't know. Yeah, for younger folks that don't know who MacGyver is, MacGyver was a TV show, and the character, he could get out of any situation. Let's say he was tied up in a room, he would somehow find a toothpick and be able to break this toothpick and use something else to make it into a knife and cut the ropes and get out. And he would use something else ridiculous to kind of like make a parachute and jump off of a mountain or something to escape just before everything blows up. It's ridiculous shit, but it's kind of
I
how
that's
you want to how that's kind of how your experience of doing the spiritual deep inner work should be. Like it should change you on that level that your awareness of the resources around you, mostly internally, because a lot of times you look out into the external world and you're like, okay, there's nothing here that I can use. But I know that
Mhm.
if I wait long enough and if I listen to my inner self, because I've become so accustomed to working with my intuition, that if I just hold on for a few more minutes, something's going to work out for me. Right.
Right. I I think it's helpful to use metaphors like MacGyver. So because it reaches people.
That's
It
what people
reached
know.
me, and
Mhm.
I was going to use a metaphor earlier with respect to, people like you were giving a list of examples that they were still eating sugar and they were still ingesting alcohol and caffeine and they were saying it doesn't matter, like you as long as you are changing your frequency and working on yourself in
Mhm.
these ways, these other external things in the 3D world, they don't matter. They're not going to affect you, right? But it's like though your 3D body, your physical form is your design. It is your tool for operating through this ether of experience. And while it's true that a knife can open a can opener, it's possible You can keep working at it and like pound it with a hammer all the way around this can and you'll get it open eventually. But it's not designed to do like that. You know, it would be better, wouldn't it be more optimal if your tool were optimally designed for what it is that you're here to do so that you can accommodate that so that there's more ease and less resistance and more flow. Just because you can do it this way doesn't mean that that's necessarily the way that is going to get you where you want to go, where you need to be in the without as much friction along the way, let's say.
Yeah, I like how you said that. So I'm gonna ask you another question about something that you said to me at the beginning when you were talking about um experiencing like a split in consciousness, sharing it with someone else. So
Yes.
just out of curiosity, are you aware of what was happening on my human design around 2021, early 2021, January?
Mm. Or so what I had looked at, I was looking at your first Saturn return. That was what that date particular was. Now, I can always go back and I might actually just edit that in and share it with you, let you know the timestamp, but I'll edit it in. If you can give me an exact date, I can look at what the planetary transits were for that date, and I can combine them with what your human design has. And just to be clear,
Okay.
it's not so much that perhaps I didn't explain it properly. What I meant to say, if I didn't, was that there are energies that we come into this world expressing, and for lack of a better term, in a divine masculine way. There are other energies that, we have access to, and these are the 64 ways as defined in the I Ching of ancient China. The 64 ways, thousands of years old. This construct or format, this is where it's derived from. And
Mhm.
these energies are energies that all of us experience and all of us have access to, and we have our own individualized experience of these energies because we are all uniquely designed individuals. But the way in which we experience it and the consistency with which we experience differs from one to another. And some of these, especially these energies that are housed in these open energy centers, open meaning undefined, white is how it looks on your body graph versus colored in. Um, these are the ones that, in order to experience them, it's being activated by something seemingly outside of ourself, whether that's another person, or it's a planetary transit, or it's a place that we find ourselves occupying and it's holding that energy and it's activating that within us. And if it's something that's inconsistent, activated by divine feminine reception by us, then it's something it's going to be a stark difference from the given baseline that is our just natural innate energy that we're kind of bringing with us wherever it is that we go. And
Mhm.
these are the two experiences of how that energy is embodied in a human physical form, according to the human design prophecy and wisdom.
You froze.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, I heard according to the human design and then it froze.
According to human design prophecy and wisdom.
Oh,
There have been
yeah.
instances where you froze too and your voice slowed down, and it was right when you were saying something like the crux of your point. And it's been an interesting connection this time.
Yeah, that has been happening to me a lot recently.
Hmm.
And it's not my internet. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
just ignore it. I just keep going. Like
Yeah.
I gave a presentation on the science of self-sabotage at Portal to Ascension. This was last week, and it was nothing but in and out. I actually ended up re-recording it and sending it to them so that they can upload it after the conference is over, so that people can go check that out on their YouTube channel, Portal to Ascension, and you will also be able to hear that on my podcast, Boundless Authenticity, which is on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble. So just want to throw that in there. But back to my question is that, so you said you wanted a date. And it would be February 27th, 2021.
February 27th, 2021. All right. I'm going to have to research that and analyze it alongside your chart. But
Okay.
I'm curious about what it's going to uncover when we scratch the surface and see what happens whenever it all comes together, because then, we might have to have a part 2 wherever you're describing that and why that is influential and why it's important.
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit about it now because you said that there's this splitting of consciousness and stuff like that. And throughout my whole life, I always felt like there was another part of me that wasn't with me. And I didn't know if it was spiritual, another person, what it was. But that was when I met my partner. And she just kind of said to me after we'd been dating for a little while, she was like, I want to tell you something really strange. I've been holding back on it for a bit because I didn't want you to think I was like a loony or something like that. I said, okay, you could tell me. And she was like, have you ever felt like a piece of you was missing? And I said, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's not like a bifurcation of consciousness or something. It's not another part of me that's gone from another timeline. It's nothing like that. It's like something in here was just gone, and it was stopping my ability, or I should say, my abilities, from being completely whole. And um, she was like, "Yeah, that's exactly what it is." So, have you ever felt like you were connected to someone else, like your consciousness was split with someone else? And I was like, yeah. And I have a feeling that I know where this is going. So we realized that we were searching for each other to complete this split in consciousness.
You should let me do a connection chart between your 2 body graphs to see the electromagnetic exchanges and the dominance channels that I find, like, and then the things in which she lights up in you, and that the things that you light up in her. That's what
Mhm.
it will, I mean, human design is just a tool. It's just a lens by which to view these different phenomena that we are experiencing. Even
Mhm.
Ra Uru, the founder of human design himself, he said learning human design is very different than living human design.
Uh-huh.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a very different experience to just like learn all of the 64 gates and what they mean and what those properties are, and to memorize them with flashcards versus to actually feel what each one of those feels like, and to feel the flavor of differentiation and to experience it through nostalgia and be able to draw upon that with wisdom. These are different things entirely. And yeah, it's I could say the same thing about my husband. We have been together for 20 years, and I met him when I was 17, and there was something that was energetically all of a sudden satisfied just by being
Mhm.
in his orbit.
Yeah.
That was it was made whole, complete, kind of like a key in a lock that opens a brand new door. And
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. And we're exactly the same. I mean, we're like this.
mhm.
We fit together like this. We're exactly the same on just about everything. There's
I bet there's
no,
ways in which you're different, that whenever you're with each other, it it makes you feel like, oh, that is a part of me.
Yeah.
Even, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
but I bet
exactly.
whenever you are in
Yeah.
isolation of each other, it manifests
Mhm.
very differently.
Yeah,
That
whenever there's a disagreement or a difference, it's never a violent thing. It actually amplifies our power in a
yes.
positive way, and it helps get things done. It's incredible. I only wish that everybody else on this planet could have that experience, but and I think that we go through people, and sometimes our soul knows, and other times our soul is confused, and that's what I liken it to because I spent my entire life going through women trying to find this one, and even the way that she looks, her face and everything, I've been looking for that person because I wanted her since I was a child,
Mm-hmm.
and we've known each other in other lifetimes too.
Oh
We've been
yeah.
looking for each other. Yeah.
I told my Michael I used to talk to you in my bed when I was alone and lonesome. I would talk to you, and he was like, I think we had entire conversations before we ever met.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah, exactly.
and yeah, and some of those memories come back too of, and some of them can be painful, the memories that didn't happen in this lifetime. Um, I know that I've experienced that as well, and it does add depth, and it adds dimension to
Hmm.
why it is that you're continuing to choose to be together, to continue to learn everything that you are. And that's very, very inherent in your specific design, Jehan. You are here to have a partnership. That's that third quarter, the number 3 in your incarnation cross. You see, a lot of people think that the natural flow after individualization would be a partnership, when in actuality, it's tribalism. We had tribalism long before we were able to explore the depth that is possible between two people only. And I think that's something that's very interesting about the processional workings of that circuitry.
Yeah.
Mm. How can people find you if they would like to work closely with you in their own self-sabotage challenges?
Well, you can email me directly at selfsabotageinfo@proton.me, or you can follow me on Instagram at Jehan Sattaur. That's JehanSattaur. I also have an exclusive Facebook group that you can join. I know that you're a part of it, and I leave a lot of things in there about self sabotage. And sometimes I'll ask questions or put free workbooks in there. A lot of the posts that I make in there are actually designed for you to self-reflect. So it'll be a text post, and then it'll have questions that you can ask yourself, and you kind of like write it down and stuff if you want to. And in that group, then you can private message me and with your self reflections or whatever it is, and we can go through it. I mean, I'm not charging anybody for anything. If you want to join that group, so that's the purpose of that group, really, so that people can get free help.
That's
Um,
amazing. And
and then
I know
go
that
ahead.
we'll definitely drop those links in the comments in the description of that video. And I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with us here today on ZenJen Connections. It's been an absolute pleasure to have your expertise and your experience showcased. I've really enjoyed connecting with you today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, Jen, I'm really grateful that we're friends, and I'm happy to be on with you anytime you want to talk.
Thank you, Jehan. Well, thank you for being with us today. If there's anybody who wants to connect personally with Jehan, I'm going to leave all of those links readily available And you can learn in the vicinity of a line 6 who has been through it, and he has quite a bit to share with you, and I can attest to the validity of all of this wisdom that he's shared with us today. So thank you so much.